Welcome to Democracy Now!
Award-winning investigative journalism.
Is the NRA imploding?
Providing relevant analysis that makes you think.
Secret State Department documents, including evidence of U.S. war crimes.
Fact-finding reports you will not hear elsewhere. Democracy Now! Airs Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. on 91.3 FM, WBNY, Buffalo.
Tune in 91.3 FM WBNY Mondays 6 p.m. for Mental Health Versus, where Carl Shallahorn mashes up music and mental health in a way you've never heard before. Carl dives into topics such as trauma, depression, and anxiety with compelling guests and captivating music. Mental Health Versus, a show both entertaining and informative. Check out Mental Health Versus Mondays at 6 p.m. on 91.3 FM WBNY.
Today we want to talk about women in astronomy. And who are the names that come to mind when you think about women in astronomy?
Well, I learned about Mary Jackson from reading the book Hidden Figures. And, you know, she's just this amazing woman who wanted to become an engineer at NASA. She wanted to take the classes. They wouldn't let her in the school. It was for whites only. She fought to get a place in the class, got her certification, and became the first black woman engineer at NASA. You know, what I love is that the history of women in astronomy goes back very, very far. Women have always been there. They've always been making contributions. Many people have heard of the famous astronomer William Herschel, but his sister Caroline actually used his telescopes and discovered a number of comets.
All right, welcome to Living for the People. This is L. Nathan Hare, your host here. Welcome you to our broadcast, focused on providing you insight into events shaping our national and regional world and the facts behind those events and policies that are shaping our world for today and for tomorrow. Join us weekly on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. following Me Goodman's Democracy Now! Program. And of course, you know our program is live, so you can call and you can join our discussion. We really hope that you will. Our number here again is 716-878-5104. That's 716-878-5104. And we're still missing Norma Carter, our in-studio audience of one. Yeah. He's missing in action, but we do know where he is. It's not like he's lost.
Yeah.
And we're here with Willie H., who has citizenship in the 21st century, which allows him to be able to do the live streaming of our program. Welcome, Willie.
Welcome, everybody, to Living for the People with L. Nathan here. Guys, make sure you call in 716-878-5104. That's 716-878-5104.
And a shout back out to James Braun, our show's producer. He's the one who produced that soundbite that we're going to be talking about today, because this is the last week of Women's History Month. So we wanted to do a little bit more visiting on that subject, amongst other things we're going to talk about today. We do need to talk a little bit about your cousin. Well, actually, Willie's cousin, Ron DeSantis. I won't even go through some of the names that they're being tossed around.
I don't know what happened to Ron. Ron thinks he's
no,
white.
Don't say that. Ron is being revealed. Right? It's not that something happened to Ron that changed Ron. Ron is just being revealed. Right. And you're just finding out how much it disgusts you. Is that what this guy's really about?
Wow.
Right?
I'm like, wow.
But before we get there, let's talk a little bit about women's history, and I'm going to blend this into a discussion about African women in the history of astronomy and engineering in this country. But I wanted to talk about women in launching. I don't know if many of us know that the field of astrophysics actually began with the work of women.
Wow.
Women literally invented astrophysics as a science in this world.
The mathematics, right? The mathematics? Is that what it is?
Not just the mathematics, but applying it to the study of the stars.
Wow.
Because if you learn the stars, you can learn what stars come up when. You can learn how far stars are away from each other, how far galaxies are away from each other, how far they are away from the Earth. You can pinpoint where something is on the Earth by measuring where it is in relation to the stars.
Wow.
And you get a much more accurate description of where something is on Earth by what you learn about where something is in the sky. So this became science that you could apply to daily life, you know, in our experience in the world. Elizabeth Howell wrote an article talking about 20 trailblazing women in astronomy and astrophysics, discovering planets to follow. Discovering planets to following comets. Women all over the world play a crucial role in astronomy. While it's hard to pick the definitive list of women who have contributed to our understanding of the cosmos, Elizabeth Howell drew out a sampling of who these pioneering women were, and we're going to talk about a sampling of them. We can't talk about everything that she talks about in the time that we have, but she talks about what they accomplished and providing a slight idea of the kinds of things they fought through. And then we'll close the discussion with an overview of the struggles and contributions of women who made the first missions of NASA possible, when the word computer used to describe a human being. Mm-hmm. There was a time when the word computer didn't describe the little thing you got in your hand, you know, that you used to talk on the phone and watch TV and search the internet, you know, and so on. A computer was actually a human being. And we'll talk a little bit about what that meant. But you heard in the soundbite that James provided for us a discussion about Caroline Herschel. She is the first woman credited with discovering a comet and is also the first to receive honorary membership with Britain's prestigious Royal Society. With her older brother, William, and William Herschel gets a lot of lift in the field of astronomy. I mean, he's a noted name. But his sister, Caroline, actually was much more accomplished than he was in terms of the discoveries that she was responsible for. It was Herschel's enthusiasm in astronomy that she is best remembered for. She used to polish mirrors and do other assistant tasks for her brother. But with him, she compiled a 20-year survey of the night sky, including 2,500 new nebulae and star clusters that were eventually compiled into a text called the New General Catalog. Herschel also observed the sky on her own, discovering 2 new nebula using a small Newtonian telescope. Among her later achievements, or career achievements, were the cross-indexing of an existing star catalog that had been compiled by John Flamsteed, but in hers, she included 550 stars that had been discovered prior to or since John Flamsteed's catalog that were not included in that catalog by Flamsteed. Then there was Maria Mitchell, and I didn't mention that Caroline Herschel, she lived from 1750 to 1848, so roughly 98 years. Maybe that astronomy is something we ought to attach ourselves to if it gets you 98 years. Right?
98 years, wow.
Maria Mitchell, she lived from 1818 to 1889, roughly 71 years. She's best remembered for discovering a comet using a telescope in 1847. She's usually cited as the first professional female astronomer in the United States. By age 12, she had helped her father calculate the exact position of their house by using a solar eclipse. 2 years later, she rated ship chronometers for professionals. These were devices that were used to measure time in challenging conditions involving motion or local weather variations. She worked at the Nantucket Athenaeum as a librarian between 1836 and 1856, resigning from that post to focus on travel and astronomy studies. By 1865, she had become an astronomy professor at Vassar College. Among her notable achievements, including her work for the federal government, she became the first woman member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. I always find it unsettling when I have to make this statement that a woman was the first something, in the United States. Women have been 51 or 52% of all of the people on Earth since the beginning of Earth. So why are we talking about women as this is the first time they've been able to do something in the last 100, 150 years? Why isn't that like the norm? We should be questioning ourselves and then checking ourselves and make sure that we don't continue to reinstitutionalize the same misogyny, that have been going on in our society for so many centuries and so many years. I want to talk then about Annie Jump Cannon. She lived from 1863 to 1941, roughly 78 or so years. She's renowned for her approach to classifying and examining stars, including, these classifications don't mean anything to those who don't know anything about astronomy. It's the OBA, F, G, K, or M classification of stellar objects. But she was employed as one of the few dozen female computers or mathematicians hired by Edward Charles Pickering, director of the Harvard College Observatory. In that capacity, they studied photographic plates of stars. These female computers studied these photographic plates of stars, giving them specialized knowledge of the sky, work considered to be too tedious for men of that day. Cannon alone classified more than 350,000 stars in her career and supplemented other women's work in our understanding of stellar spectra. Other career contributions by Annie Jump Cannon included publishing 9 volumes of the Henry Draper Catalog between 1918 and 1924, creating the Harvard Catalog of Variable Stars, and receiving numerous awards. She received a position at Harvard in 1938. Just think about that for a second. She had published a series of volumes of the Harvard Draper Catalog starting in 1918, going on all the way through 1924. She created the Harvard Catalog of Variable Stars after 1924, and yet she didn't get a job at Harvard until 1938 because she was a woman. I just want you to keep that in your mind as we talk about this information. Let me then visit with Henrietta Swan Leavitt. She's best remembered for discovering the relationship between period and luminosity. Period is the interval between things, and luminosity is how bright things are. And so she talks about the relationship between period and luminosity in Cepheid variables, which are stars that fluctuate predictably in luminosity, their inherent brightness. Cepheids are used as standard distance markers in astronomy, allowing scientists to estimate distances to galaxies and other faraway objects. She started her astronomy career at the Harvard. Notice how many of these things happen around Harvard, by the way. The Harvard College Observatory under Edward Charles Pickering, the same Edward Charles Pickering that was the employer of Annie Jump Cannon we talked about just a bit ago, analyzing photographic plates. By examining thousands of these images, she found that some stars have a consistent luminosity during fluctuations. Leavitt unfortunately received little credit for her work during her lifetime, with most of the glory going to Harlow Shapley, who used Leavitt's work to chart distances in the Milky Way. After her death, however, other astronomers came to recognize her work. For example, the American astronomer Edwin Hubble used Leavitt's information to help him compute the distance to the Andromeda Galaxy, which is the closest large galaxy to the Milky Way. Then there is Cecilia Payne, and I'm probably butchering her name, Jaboskin. Did I say that close to right? Just say I said it close to right.
Close to right.
Okay, good. All right. She lived from 1900 to 1979. Payne Gaboshkin made numerous contributions to astronomy. Her PhD thesis focused on how the line patterns she saw in spectra of stars could be related to physical conditions of those stars, which is fundamental work still underlying much of our understanding of stars today, and earned her the first PhD in astronomy afforded to a woman at the Harvard-affiliated Radcliffe College. Her thesis was the first demonstration that hydrogen is the main component of most stars and that helium is also a principal component of star formation. She finally was awarded the first woman's professorship at Harvard in 1956, even attaining the status of department chair, another first for a woman. I'm glad that women are making these strides, but it's troubling that we're talking about the 1950s as if we're feeling good about ourselves and we're doing something in 1950. I thought that we were modern and we were grown-ups by 1950.
Well, we're still learning our history.
We still are, and still learning how to behave.
I'm 60 and I'm still finding out people of color or especially women.
Yep.
Even women, people of color, women that did great, wonderful things.
Yep. So the next person I want to speak about was Helen Sawyer Hogg. She lived from 1905 to 1993. She is best remembered for researching variable stars in globular clusters, or what they refer to as clusters of older stars. Together with her astronomer husband, his name was Frank Hogg, they developed expertise in globular clusters and variable stars that was highly cited in her own time. Canadians remember her for a long-standing astronomy column that she had in the Toronto Star newspaper that ran from 1951 to 1981. Hogg became an adjunct full professor in the astronomy department of the University of Toronto in 1957 and studied more than 2,000 variable stars by her career's end, providing fundamental information about the age of the Milky Way galaxy. She was the founding president of the Canadian Astronomical Society in 1971, and she received Canada's highest civilian honor, the Order of Canada, in 1976. Then there was Mark. Now, these aren't the only people. I've just given you a survey of some folks that made just tremendous strides and made the field of astrophysics possible, in the United States and around the world. Margaret Burbidge, she lived from 1919 to 2020, literally 101 years. Her contributions to astronomy included probing the nature of stars and contributing to instrument development of the famed Hubble Space Telescope. She was most famous for her work showing how stars create heavier elements over time and how stars send those elements through the universe. Burbidge led a 4-person team in the 1950s that examined how reactions occur within stars, backed up by astronomical observations and theoretical computations. A colleague later won the Nobel Prize for her team's research. A male colleague got a Nobel Prize for the work done by her team that was led by her.
I think a lot of that happened, Mr. Hare. I think a lot of that happened throughout history.
Yeah. But can we talk about it, or will it make some American citizens?
Yeah, let's talk about it. And also, the thing is, the stuff that you telling us about, are we learning that? Is our children learning that in the schools?
None of it. Not a single thing I said have our children learned in school.
Wow. All right, let's talk about it, though.
It's not like the knowledge doesn't exist.
Right.
The knowledge exists, but it doesn't get taught.
Right.
This is the kind of stuff that, let's suppose, some parent, a male parent, feels funny about talking about the fact that Margaret Burbidge's work had been suppressed for so many years, and he felt funny about that. Well, that makes me feel bad as a man that man did stuff like that. That shouldn't be taught in schools. Pull that book out and let's not have that in the library. Don't discuss that anymore. That's what Ron DeSantis is talking about. It's having that. I mean, think about this. You have so many things that were done by so many people that are suppressed. Things that were done, things that were not done, things that were the focus of our collective activity as a nation, and things that were the focus of negative actions of us as a nation of people. But all of that is a part of our history that provides learning. If you learn from your history, you are armored to not repeat it. But if you don't learn from your history, you are guaranteed to repeat the same mistakes over and over and over and over again. How many world wars have we fought?
Where we at?
We fought 2 world wars,
We in the
but before that time, we fought the Spanish-American War,
Mhm.
right? We fought the War of the Roses. You know, we've had these massive, destructive cataclysms in our history,
Mhm.
and they come over the same issues over and over and over again. When are we going to figure out that if you have a system of elites who benefit from the work of the
Right.
masses,
Right.
that sooner or later the masses are going to come together and fight
Right.
you, and then the elites are going to hire people they call armies
Right.
to fight against the masses,
Right.
and sooner or later a chasm is going to form, and everything that you have built in that
Right.
society is going to fall into the pit of that
And that's
cataclysm.
kind of what's happening.
Here you
now.
go, and then you
Oh
wind up
my
having to
God.
start all over again,
Wow.
over and over and over again. Why keep doing that? Is it so important for you to be, Idi Amin in charge and have your brand be the only brand
Well,
that
I
people?
guess once you get used to that position, you don't want to lose it.
So that's what we're talking about here, right? In researching alongside her husband Joffrey, Margaret Burbidge, she worked on other parts of astronomy, such as the masses and rotations of spiral galaxies like the Milky Way and the redshifts to quasars, which are extremely luminous objects in the universe. Burbidge became the first female president of the International Astronomical Union's Commission on Galaxies. She was director of the Royal Greenwich Observatory in London, and she was the president of the American Astronomical Society. I only got about 7 minutes left in this segment, so I'm going to kind of rush through a little bit of this. Beth Brown is best known for her contributions to astronomy, along with helping women and minorities pursue astrophysics careers. Her most recent position was NASA Goddard Space Flight Center Assistant Director for Science, Communication, and Higher Education. She tragically died at age 39 due to a pulmonary embolism, or she would have done many more things. She became the first African-American woman to pursue graduate studies in astronomy at the University of Michigan. She received her PhD there in 1998. Her dissertation concerned X-ray observations of elliptical galaxies using the RONTGEN satellite, however you pronounce that word, Rontgen or something. But post graduation, Brown's other positions included Goddard postdoctoral fellow and Goddard Astrophysics fellow. The last person I'm going to talk about in this segment is Barbara A. Williams. She was the first, second last person. She was the first African-American woman to achieve a PhD in astronomy in 1981. She received her education at the University of North Carolina. Her groundbreaking research includes examining neutral atomic hydrogen emissions to study several galaxies and looking at the role of atomic gases within galaxy groups, among other topics. Today, she is based at the University of Delaware. She's still alive and is an active member of the International Astronomical Union. The last person I want to talk about in this segment is Wanda Diaz Merced, who's a current day astronomer. She applied for an internship at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. I didn't mention that she's a Hispanic woman. And together with Robert Candy, she created technology to analyze astronomical data converted to sound. One of her groundbreaking projects included simulating a task to identify black holes in nearby galaxies. She played back the sounds of an experiment to astrophysicists at Harvard University to see if they could identify which of the simulations included a black hole. Her results suggested that sonification of data, including sounds in the information, helped scientists find black holes, which are sometimes difficult amid background information. So the last thing I wanted to talk about in this segment before we hit the break is Hidden Figures. I know you all heard this story before, but
yeah, I saw the movie.
There's the movie, right?
I saw the movie.
There was a book written by Margaret Shetterly that talked about this evolution. on the brink, as America stood on the brink of the Second World War, there was a push for astronomical advancement, spurring an insatiable demand for mathematicians. Women were the solution. I'll write that again. Women were the solution. They needed mathematicians. Yeah. They went to women. And they ushered into the Langley Memorial Aeronautical Laboratory in 1935 to shoulder the burden of number crunching. They acted as human computers, freeing the engineers of hand calculations in the decades before the digital age. Sharp and successful, the female population at Langley skyrocketed. Many of these computers, these female mathematicians, are finally getting their due, but conspicuously missing from the story of female achievement are the efforts contributed by courageous African-American women.
Right.
They were called the West Computers. They were called the West Computers because the only building they were able to be housed in was called the West Building on the Langley campus.
Right.
That was, in other words, that was the colored people's building.
Right.
Feel that, right. Okay? Margaret Lee Shetterly wrote the book Hidden Figures, shining a light on the inner details of these women's lives and their accomplishments. She said that the West Computers were assigned to the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, or NACA, which was intended, did I say that wrong? Yeah. Which was intended to turn the floundering flying gadgets of that day into war machines. In other words, you had people tinkering with stuff, in the period between the 1920s and the late 1930s, early 1940s. These women were assigned often to take these sort of gadgets and figure out, can you use these things to put mines on them? Can you put bombs on them? Can you put machine guns on them? And things like that. In other words, to create weapons of destruction.
Right.
The agency was dissolved in 1958 and replaced by the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA. I'm pretty sure most of us are familiar with that. NASA, yeah. Christine Darden worked to advance supersonic flight. One of the women, that were employed as one of these computers, but they were able to get pulled off into a different assignment where they actually had responsibility, this woman, Christine Darden, to work to advance supersonic flight, and Katherine Johnson, who was assigned to calculate the trajectories for the Mercury and Apollo missions. Yeah. In fact, John Glenn said, "I'm not leaving."
Yeah. In the movie, I saw the movie, and in the movie, he said, "Listen, you guys, that lady, which was a black woman,
right?
I'm not." Until she gave me the figures, because he had
me and the rocket are going to stay here,
right?
Until she says go,
right?
Me and the rocket are going to stay here.
Because he figured out that she had it going on. She knew what she was talking about. So he knew, well, if she give me the calculations, I know I got a chance.
And it's so funny. The first black computers or women mathematicians didn't set foot at Langley until the 1940s. It wasn't until 1941 when A. Philip Randolph, a pioneering civil rights activist, proposed a march on Washington. This was the original proposal of the March on Washington, not the march that you all think about in 1963. But this is the one that Randolph, who also was the one that organized the march in 1963. Wow. But he first proposed this in 1941.
Wow.
Eisenhower's administration was so intimidated by the likelihood of having all these black people showing up in Washington and making a ruckus that he said he issued a executive order 8802 preventing racial discrimination in hiring for federal and war-related work. This order cleared the way for the black computers to slide rule in hand to make their way into NASA history. So that's all we can cover right now. I just wanted to give you a little bit of a taste of what is out there, what we need to be learning, what we should be proud of, that we should be visiting on. We should be teaching each other and learning from each other. Right. Thank you all. Look forward to talking to you on the other side of the break here at Living for the People at 91.3 FM WBNY.
Some people won't give you the real talk on drugs, but it's time we know the facts. Fentanyl is often laced into illicit drugs and used to make fake versions of prescription pills. You can't see it, taste it, or smell it. Suppliers mix fentanyl into their products because it's potent and cheap, and the dealer might not even know. Keep yourself and others safe by knowing the real deal on fentanyl. Get the facts. Go to realdealonfentanyl.com. This message is brought to you by the Ad Council.
Tune in 91.3 FM WBNY Mondays 6 p.m. for Mental Health Versus, where Carl Shallahorn mashes up music and mental health in a way you've never heard before. Carl dives into topics such as trauma, depression, and anxiety with compelling guests and captivating music. Mental Health Versus, a show both entertaining and informative. Check out Mental Health Versus Mondays at 6 p.m. on 91.3 FM WBNY.
All right, you guys are kind of quiet out there. We're looking for those phones to start ringing. Let us know what your thoughts are about the things that we're talking about today. But I want to hit a couple of other notes before I talk a little bit about Ron DeSantis and how I think he's being perceived by the public. But before we get there, I want to mention Marjorie Taylor Greene organized a visit. This is a really strange thing, a visit of Congresspeople, mostly Republican Congresspeople, although 2 Democrats went on this visit, to a Washington, D.C. prison for the purpose of finding out what the conditions were that the January 6th either convicted, felons or people that are still in custody waiting trial for the crimes of obstruction of justice and other things, destruction of federal property, et cetera, in the insurrection that took place on January 6th of 2021. And so Marjorie Taylor Greene took some Republicans to go to the prison to see, look at the conditions that they're in. How terrible these conditions are. These people are being forced to live in. This is just horrible. And of course, Jasmine Crockett, who is a congresswoman from Texas, along with I forgot the other fellow that went on this trip with her. But what she talked about was, in fact, I think I have his name. Goodness gracious! It'll come back to me in a second. I have a tendency to forget names. Robert Garcia is the name I was trying to think of. They pointed out that Marjorie Taylor Greene had never said anything in her life about prison reform, about prison conditions, about what was going on inside, the nation's prisons. But for these January 6th defendants, now all of a sudden they're concerned about what's going on inside of the prisons. And so just quoting the article, Jasmine Crockett, who's the congresswoman from Texas, in a recent interview, gave Marjorie Taylor Greene a reality check regarding jail conditions across the country following their House members' visit to a D.C. jail holding these January 6th defendants. Crockett on January 6th said, this is not the norm. Even in the women's area, they've got art therapy. This is in the federal prison now. They got art therapy, they got yoga, they got acupuncture. She said, these are things that you can't find from my people who aren't incarcerated. Right? She said they got 2 types of tablet computers and they got a barbershop. That's what's going on there. How many of you have known of any prison anywhere on earth that had these kinds of conveniences? Right? Maybe 1 or 2, for the rich and famous, because they got prisons for the rich and famous, in this country as well. Following their tour of the jail, Greene tweeted, this is Greene now trying to characterize it her way. She says, well, from our visit at the D.C. jail yesterday, Democrat Oversight Committee members Jasmine Crockett and Robert Garcia, who this is the first time they've ever visited the D.C. jail, they sang the jail's praises. Shame on them for not knowing the long history of outrage in Washington, D.C. about the D.C. jail conditions and treatment. or they didn't do their homework to know that the D.C. jail had inmates clean, scrub, and paint the week before we got there so conditions would look good for our visit. Former federal prosecutor and attorney John Filipkowski posted a screenshot of Green's tweet, and he wrote this. He says, actually, Miss Green, Representative Crockett is a former public defender and civil rights attorney who has been a prison reform advocate for many years, unlike Marge. What she said she observed was the January 6 inmates being treated much better than the vast majority of inmates around the country. So Crockett emphasized, I don't know what world Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and the rest of them are living in. I don't know what world they live in, but it's not our world, right? It just so you understand, that was the outcome of the so-called Republican congressional visit, to the prison that some of these January 6 defendants were being held at. A quick note on George Santos. This is an article written by Julia Vargas Jones, written for CNN. Prosecutors accept deal with George Santos in Brazilian fraud case. And you can imagine, once you hear how this deal goes out, how Santos is going to play it. He's going to play it that I've never been tried for anything. I've never been convicted of anything. I'm still clean. I made some mistakes. This had happened. Now, this is something that happened in 2008. That's 15 years ago. You're telling me that you are just now getting clean from stuff that you did in 2008, and we're supposed to be thinking that you should be a good candidate to be a congressperson? So prosecutors in Brazil have agreed to a deal with George Santos in a case, this is Representative George Santos, in a case in which he is accused of defrauding a Rio de Janeiro clerk of $1,300 over clothes and shoes in 2008. A petition from Santos's attorney requesting a deal says Santos would agree to formally confess to the crime and pay damages to the victim as is required under Brazilian law. In a statement to CNN, the prosecutor's office acknowledged that the memo but stressed that the deal is not final until all conditions are met. The petition from Santos's attorney, filed in January, requests a non-prosecutorial agreement in lieu of a trial for his client, arguing that Santos is now gainfully employed as a congressperson and re-socialized. I'm not making it up. That's what the petition says. Santos is re-socialized. So he used to be a crook, and now he's been re-socialized to be a non-crook and a congressperson for the United States. The one that wears the little lapel pins that look like AK-47 rifles, that's George Santos. The petition also requested permission for Santos to be contacted by the court via email or phone and participate in the proceedings via video conference. In 2010, Santos told police he wrote bad checks from a stolen checkbook belonging to an elderly man his mother cared for to purchase the items. Santos told the New York Post in December that he had not been charged with any crime in Brazil. He says, I'm not a criminal here. I'm not here or in Brazil or in any jurisdiction in the world. Absolutely not. That did not happen. What world does George Santos live in? No, what world do we live in that we accept this nonsense from George Santos? All right, so I won't go any further on this case than that. I just wanted to get a little update, on what's going on. You're going to see this happen. That, Santos is going to work through his attorneys to find the most muffle-mouth, milquetoast way of solving each of the things that he's been accused of. What's the word? Believably accused of, evidence accused of. And that by the time all this is done, it'll be sifted out that he has no criminal background. He has no marks on him that would impeach his ability to be a congressperson in the United States House of Representatives. But let me go to Ron DeSantis, because we only got about, 15, 18 minutes to go. Let me just kind of speak on that. This is an article written by Rex Hupke. Behold Ron's culture war. Behold Ron culture war DeSantis is the way it reads. The Florida emperor with no clothes. This was written in USA Today, and I believe this was written yesterday. In Ron DeSantis' free state of Florida, you said the free state of Texas, the free state of Alaska. I think we got a free state of California. We got a free state of Oregon. Do we have anything that's not a free state? Do we have a country? Is this still the United States of America? Right. So in Ron DeSantis' free state of Florida, a charter school principal was forced to resign after sixth grade students were shown images of Michelangelo, notably that included nude sculpture of the statue of David. Now, we're talking about Renaissance art. We're talking about kids, 12 years old, 13 years old, learning about Renaissance art during the Middle Ages that depicted David, right? The king, David, in his nudity, because that's how they rolled. That's what they did, right? And that's what Michelangelo and Picasso and all of the folks of that genre, that's what they did. They reflected things as they saw it. No, can't teach that. See, so apparently some parent of a sixth grade child saw, whatever the material was the child was, working with in school, had a picture of Michelangelo with his, parts flailing, and they, oh my God, that was in the book? They showed this in school? Oh no, terrible. Called up, the school, called up their congressperson, called up, whoever their council person was, and they fired the principal for having text work in his sixth grade classroom reflecting the Renaissance history, the Renaissance movement, historical movement in this country. You got to put your microphone where I can hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I remember going on trips and we museums or whatever, or even in school history books. Well, you see pictures or sculptures of, the nudity.
Right.
Lots of pictures, and nobody ever said it. I don't get it.
You can just ride down the 198 and ride by the statue of Michelangelo,
right,
and see him in his nudity,
right,
and so on, right? I mean, this is normative stuff, right?
And nobody's offended.
But apparently it offended somebody.
Wow.
See, so we claim, Ron DeSantis and his ilk claim that they're putting parents in charge of their kids' education. But what they're really doing is putting some parents in charge of everybody else's education. Yeah. So you got something that maybe one or two parents out of 100 would even care about,
right? But
they're trapping the other 97, 98 of parents. They can only learn what these one or two parents are willing to hear because they feel offended. Oh, those black people did that? I mean, those white people did that to those black people, kept them out of the Langley, facility and not allowed them to be able to work as engineers, even though they were, the smartest mathematicians in the world.
Right.
The white people did that? Oh, that makes me feel shamed. We can't teach that.
Well, and when I saw the movie, one of the women mathematicians, she worked with the engineers in the building. And in order for her to go to the bathroom, she had to go walk over a mile because she couldn't go to the bathroom that was in the building that was only a minute away.
The Langley campus is a very long campus. It's like a 1.5, 2 mile long campus. Right. She had to walk to the other side of the campus, literally a mile away to go to the bathroom.
To the bathroom.
Now, I don't know how fast you all walk, but most people, it takes them about 15 minutes to walk a mile.
Right.
Maybe a little bit longer than that, maybe 20 minutes to walk a mile.
That's correct.
So you had to hold your water for all that time until you got there, and then don't mess up when you get there, when you're trying to take yourself apart to be able to go to the bathroom and so on, right? But it's that kind of constant insult. These are what you call microaggressions. It's not like they were walking up to her and calling her the N-word to her face, but they were doing things to the African women that weren't being done to white women. For example, white women were allowed to live in a dormitory on the campus of Langley's,
Did not know
you
that.
know, right, the National Aeronautics, whatever you call it, NASA, Space Administration. They were allowed to live physically on campus, in a dormitory on campus. The black women had to go find a space somewhere off campus. They couldn't live on the Langley campus at all.
Wow.
Because they were black.
Wow.
Even though John Glenn couldn't get to space unless black women, you know, did the computations for him, and he had their word that the computations were correct and that he could trust them to use to make whatever decisions they had to make in order to get a flight off the ground. So apparently the horrors of art and anatomy were just too much for some parents, because Ron DeSantis has empowered adults dippy enough to consider Renaissance art to be pornography, that this principle, in the spirit of freedom, you know, Ron DeSantis' version of freedom, this principle was shown the door. This is the second case we've seen of Ron DeSantis firing somebody for free speech. Did we have a caller hanging on there?
Yes, we got a caller.
Yep, let me grab that call real quick. Hi, caller, are you there?
Yes, yeah, I am, and I just want to say I think that statue of David on the 198 should have a piece of cloth.
There we go. There we go. I was thinking they ought to put a shade over it.
We got to do it.
I was thinking they should put a shade over it, you know. So
a shade.
You could pull a string down, right?
This pornography on the 198 needs to be removed. In fact, they should take the whole statue down, sir.
The whole thing.
Hey, guys, that's a conversation piece as you drive by. Come on.
They should take down the base of the statue, too, because there used to be a naked statue on top of it. The whole thing ought to go.
This is true. I mean, if we can't teach our students properly in school, what's the use of it all?
Yeah.
Well, obviously, we can't do it under Ron DeSantis' version of education. And the thing that's so interesting is when it's people's desire to suppress other people's speech, as long as the people whose speech you want to suppress are other people, then it's okay for you to do that. But if you went the other way around and you were the one trying to get liberal stuff included in the education, they would be suppressing your ability to get liberal stuff into the education, whatever they call, liberal, into the education stream. So
it's almost like how some people classify what art is and what art shouldn't be.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful piece of work.
I mean, from its technical precision, that's the first thing that you have to look at. In that era, they were trying their best to create things that were real, that were not real. They had realism, Right. So whenever they did a sculpture of a dove or a deer or a cow, they made it as close to exact observation as possible. So you would see the sinews of the bone, you'd see how muscles moved as something stood, and so on.
Right.
That was what they did. That was their movement. It was a realism movement. So how can you teach the realism movement without showing the realism that they're actually depicting and so on?
Well, you're almost associating parts of the body that shouldn't be seen, that shouldn't be talked about. Let's close the doors. Young people shouldn't learn about this. And to my way of thinking, young people need to know what's, works of art. And frankly, what these body parts, there's nothing wrong with showing reproductive body parts.
Especially if you put it in context, you know what I mean? If you put something in a context, if you study something and it's being presented to you as an academic exercise to help you to understand the process of something, that's the way your mind will think about it.
Right.
Yeah.
If you show something the exact same thing, but you put it in the context of it being lewd, or it's being pornographic, then that's the way you'll think about it.
Right.
That's right.
So you have to lead people through the information and the ideas that you're exposing them to. But you don't like fail to give people education on stuff that is a part of the world that they're living in, because somebody in some corner someplace who's probably got a porno magazine, on his toilet seat and whatnot, that he got an objection, to something like that being taught.
Certainly when the work was done, that had nothing to do with those type of thoughts.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's a work of art. Thank you, Mr. Hare. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Brother Brown. I'll talk to you soon.
Yes, sir.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
All right, so things haven't gone that well for Ron Sanctimonious. That's Donald Trump's name for him now, is Ron Sanctimonious. They talk about recent stumbles by the GOP presidential primary frontrunner, and former President Donald Trump has labeled him Ron Sanctimonious. DeSantis referred to Russia's deadly invasion of Ukraine as a territorial dispute. The invasion of Ukraine, he referred to as a territorial dispute, a dispute over whether the border should be over here or 20 miles, to the left, or 20 miles to the west. We're not talking about that kind of thing. That's not the dispute between Virginia and West Virginia about where the border is between those two states. We're talking about invading another country entirely and trying to take over that entire country and wipe it out of existence. Ron DeSantis referred to the deadly invasion of Ukraine as a territorial dispute. When he was admonished by Democrats and even some Republicans, he flip-flopped in an interview with Piers Morgan, and he said, well, Russian President Vladimir Putin, he's a war criminal. But then after the Republicans that are fans of Donald Trump came at him and said, you can't be saying that. We're fans of Vladimir, Putin. So he came back out and he says, well, I care more about securing our own border in the United States than I do about the Russia-Ukraine border. What that tells you is if Ron DeSantis becomes the president of the United States and the struggle with Ukraine is still going on, you can't trust Ron DeSantis to stand behind the policy that the United States has been under with regard to Ukraine.
And I would think there's some people that probably feel the same way as Ron DeSantis, too. That's probably why
I'm sure there are. There's a lot of selfish people in the world. But as I've said many times before, you have to look at this thing from a larger perspective than just whether or not we have enough money to be able to pay out dollars to Ukraine to help them fight their war against Russia. Mm-hmm. You're right. It is Ukraine's war against Russia. It's not America's war against Russia. But the other part of right is if you let the Russians do this, they will not stop.
Right.
They will take over Moldavia. They will take over Soviet Georgia. They will take over Lithuania. They'll take over Belarusia, and so on. Poland, these are all neighboring countries. They will try to take over all of these things.
So coming for us.
Exactly. Remember what the parable is, right? They came for the handicapped. They came for the homosexuals. They came for the gypsies. They came for everybody else. And then one day they came for me. And when they came for me, I reached out to the folks that were in my environment to come and help me, but there was no one left to help me, right? So we should learn from our history. So being a popular governor doesn't necessarily make DeSantis the political juggernaut that Republicans have been hyping him up to be. Perhaps the most clear evidence that DeSantis' culture war hollering has become white noise, literally and figuratively, was the news last week that Disney World will be hosting the Out and Equal Workplace Summit, one of the world's largest LGBTQ conferences. Did you even know there was such a thing as a Out and Equal Workplace Summit?
No,
I didn't know it either, but it's the biggest one in the world, and it's being held at the Don't Say Gay? Is that what his law is? Don't Say Gay. So DeSantis boasts incessantly about his battles with woke Disney, which started with when the company spoke about the governor's law prohibiting teachers from talking about gender identity or sexual orientation in school classrooms through the third grade, broadly known as the Don't Say Gay law. He recently signed a law giving the state control over the previously corporate-run district that encompasses Disney World, and made it sound like he, i.e. Ron DeSantis, the slayer of wokeness, now calls the shots at Walt Disney. But that's not true. Disney maintained the tax breaks and most of the power it previously had, but go ahead and you go ahead and wish upon a star, Governor. That's what the author says. After signing the Disney bill into law, DeSantis crowed to the crowd, today, the corporate kingdom of Disney World finally comes to an end. So the author says, so do you, Governor DeSantis. The rest of us are going to just keep on living. But the announcement of the Out and Equal Conference, which focuses intently on the same diversity, equity, and inclusion issues that Ron DeSantis has been railing against. We just got about 2 minutes left in the program?
2 minutes, sir.
Good
2 minutes.
gracious.
Yep.
Okay.
2 minutes.
I always overtalk myself. Has been railing against the Disney corporate kingdom's response was essentially whatever putting fingers. No, I won't even go through that stuff. That's another piece of the story altogether. The Miami Herald reported dozens of iconic American companies, including Apple, McDonald's, Uber, Walmart, Hilton, Amazon, Boeing, Cracker Barrel, John Deere, are sponsoring the Out and Equal Workplace Summit at Walt Disney in Florida right now, which they expect over 5,000 people to attend. Several agencies, including the State Department, the U.S. State Department, and the CIA, are listed as government partners and will have booths at the conference. So it's not just Disney ignoring DeSantis' anti-diversity, equity, and inclusion, anti-woke, anti-Renaissance statue ramblings. It's the Walmarts, it's the John Deeres, it's the Cracker Barrels, and generally speaking, most of corporate America and the global companies that Florida kids will one day turn to for jobs. So as Trump might say, good job with that, with all that, Rob. Maybe Rob DeSantis isn't the conservative savior some have imagined. The belief in more mainstream Republican circles seems to be that Ron DeSantis, quote unquote, the one. Remember Neo in the Matrix was the one? So Ron DeSantis is the one.
He's the one.
The tough, lib-blasting conservative who can make the Make America Great crown, or take the Make America Great crown from Donald Trump and lead the party back to the White House. The naked truth is DeSantis looks more and more like a paper tiger each day. He's a Florida version of Michelangelo's David, a wannabe emperor proudly parading around the country with no clothes. So that's our story for today. I think we're going to do a little bit more on women's history on Wednesday. So you all stick with us. We look forward to talk to you all on Wednesday here at Living for the People at 91.3 FM WBNY. We'll see you all then.